Deku, I think he's some pro. By clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Chapter 77. History. Izuku was so sore. He hadn't noticed it at first, because his hunger was a lot more pressing, and he'd still been high off adrenaline and endorphins, but now they were about halfway through dinner, and it had hit him like a brick wall. All he wanted to do was fall over and never wake up again. When Ragdoll had told them about the hot springs, the entire class had erupted into cheers, so loud that Eraser had to activate his quirk to get them to shut up. He knew it wouldn't do a lot, especially against the hell that Eraser had planned for tomorrow, but at least it would feel good in the moment. Kota hadn't stopped glaring at them the entire time. Izuku wanted to say something, but at the same time, their experiences were so fundamentally different that there wasn't really anything he could say. He had spent his entire life wanting to be a hero, and being told that he couldn't, but Kota didn't even seem to like quirks, based on the way he always glared or rolled their eyes when one of his classmates used theirs. What had even happened to make the kid hate heroes so much? Izuku frowned as Kota huffed and turned away when Kirishima tried to call out to him and offer him something to eat. How was he supposed to help someone who didn't want to be helped? Especially when he didn't really have anything in common with him. Izuku finished his food and took his bowl to the kitchen, where Tiger and Mandalay were doing the dishes. Aizawa had hidden away in there as well, huddled in the corner, looking exhausted, which Izuku thought was extremely unfair, considering that he hadn't even had to fight dirt monsters to get there. After handing off his plate to Tiger, Izuku hesitated. It was probably impolite, but Eraser would tell him that it was illogical to not ask questions.
I can see you thinking from here, Eraser groaned. Just spit it out already.
Izuku smiled nervously. Sorry, I was just wondering about Kota. I've never met anyone who hates heroes. Pretty much everyone I know wants to be one. Tiger placed a comforting hand on Mandalay's shoulder as he responded. Maybe if he'd had a normal childhood, he would like them, but... She sighed. Well, his parents were heroes.
And there's a reason he's living with you instead of them. Aizawa finished, his face softening. I'm sorry for your loss.
Mandalay smiled sadly. Thank you, but enough people have told him that his parents died an honorable death that... Well, how do you explain to a child that his parents died in the best way a hero can die? Protecting people. To him, his parents were dead and everyone was praising them for dying. It was confusing. Izuku nodded. I can't even imagine. They were the water hose heroes, right? I remember seeing the story of the news.
If his parents hadn't been heroes, they'd probably still be alive, Aizawa said bluntly. It's only logical for him to hate them. Even some of our students are too young to really understand that death is a distinct possibility when they choose this career. But for a kid who never even got to choose to take on that risk, heroes must be infuriating.
Mandalay just nodded. I hope he'll be able to make sense of it a little more when he's a bit older, but for now there's not much we can do, except love him and let him mourn. It's hard. If Izuku thought they didn't have much in common before, now they were worlds apart. He couldn't even begin to understand what it would be like to have his parents die like that, and have everyone praise them instead of acknowledging how terrible the whole thing was. He frowned, feeling a little helpless, but mentally was probably right. Time was probably the only way that Koto would be able to heal completely. Thank you for answering. Izuku bowed slightly. And if there's anything we students can do...
The best thing you kids can do is train hard, so you can avoid following in their footsteps, Tiger said sternly. Now get out of here. Those hot springs aren't getting any warmer.
They aren't getting any cooler either, Izuku smiled. Thanks again. For everything. Of course, Mandalay smiled. It's the least we can do for our future heroes. Darby ran through the plan again and tried to ignore all the crazies around him. Sure, he got a little violent, but muscular and moonfish? They just wanted to kill people. No revenge, no motivation to change society, just good old-fashioned pain and carnage. He'd met plenty of people like that in his life on the streets and knew not to get too attached. Not that there was much risk of that in the first place. Guys like that were always the first to either die or get caught, depending on who they were stupid enough to get in a fight with. Most of the other recruits were motivated by Stain's ideals, though. Which was at least something, even if they weren't Darby's first choice in co-workers. Then again, Darby would have much preferred to work alone, so maybe that wasn't the best wording. Compress was showy, but not half bad at pickpocketing and sleight of hand, which would come in useful. Big Sis Magne was just trying to carve out a place in the world. Spinner was a Stain fanboy and Twice was batshit insane. His least favorite recruit, however, was definitely Mustard. First of all, what villain names themselves after a condiment, even if it was some kind of poison gas? Second of all, the kid was, 13? Maybe younger? And already making his way into the dregs of society, cast aside and tossed out just like... Darby drowned the rest of his whiskey that Kurogiri had poured for him. It didn't matter that the kid was the same age that he'd been when he first started living on the streets. It didn't make him hate him any less. Actually, Darby was pretty sure it made him hate the kid more, because he brought back all these nasty memories from before he'd gotten on his feet. Or, well, as on his feet as he's ever gotten, but whatever. Fact was that he hated the kid, and wanted to avoid him as much as possible. Which was easy to do, since he'd basically spent his whole time brooding since he'd joined. Joy. Oh, and to make it even better, he was going to be attacking Shorthor's class, a bunch of snot-nosed kids. At least it helped him get his revenge. But he wasn't sure how he'd react if someone ended up kidnapping the brat to try and turn him to villainy. They didn't really have any strong objectives, but they'd been told to go after any students that appeared strong. So, from the sports festival, probably Shortor, that explosion kid, and maybe even that brainwasher if things went well. But they were supposed to try and bring in Deku, if they were able to, and kill him if they weren't. Darby eyed his co-workers, Muscular in particular. Yeah, if he was the one to find the kid, Deku was dead. He or Moonfish would probably say anything, just as an excuse to kill someone, including some bullshit story about how the kid was resisting capture or something. Not that Darby cared that much either way. As long as he got to help destroy the society his old man cared about so much, he was happy. Hurting his kid brother would just be a bonus. Hey, have you guys read the most recent mystery article? Spinner said suddenly, looking up from his phone. It's about Stain this time.
Who cares?
Muscular complained loudly.
The loser was weak enough to get himself captured, and he didn't even kill any of those heroes that were coming after him.
Have some respect! Muscular stood up and slammed the table in indignation. At least he had morals, unlike some people I could mention.
Is that a threat, Pipsqueak?
Muscular cracked his knuckles.
You want to go? Let's see how much of that little fart of yours does against 2 tons of pure muscle.
Mustard scowled.
It's a powerful poison gas, not a...
Was this article for or against the hero killer? Kurogiri interrupted indulgently. Darby rolled his eyes. Of course the fog guy would know how to interrupt a fight before it came to blows, having spent so much time with Shigaraki. But he couldn't help but be disappointed. He would have loved to see Muscular tear Mustard apart. Oh well, he'd just have to let the heroes do it instead. Or let them be pulled apart. Either was fine. Kind of both? Spinner said, scrolling through the article. The writer at least has some sense, because he says that Stain's ideals were sound, but he criticizes the way he went about it. Yeah, because protests are gonna do any good, Magne scoffed. He should study history if he thinks any change comes without violence. That's what I said. Spinner nodded in agreement. I think the guy is weak, but I liked what he said about actually exposing the crimes of the villains hidden in the system. He kept going on about how Stain made martyrs by killing people instead of publicizing their sins, but I don't see why he couldn't have done both.
We can talk about stupid ideals and convictions later.
Shigaraki scratched his neck as he walked in.
You're attacking those hero brats in less than 24 hours, so you noobs better be prepared to destroy them, because those stupid heroes are the one thing I hate.
With how exhausted everyone was from their trek through the forest, it was no surprise that they were still yawning and rubbing their eyes when Pixie Bob woke them up. Pretty much everyone got out of bed fairly quickly, though, which turned out to be the right decision, because Shinso ended up with ice water dumped over his head, courtesy of Aizawa when he refused to get up. Kaminari and the rest of the others who were trying to sleep in were quick to scramble out of their sleeping bags before their teacher could refill the bucket. Once they were all dressed and fed, Eraser led them out and started handing out tasks to everyone, each personalized to stretch their quirks to the limits. Every task was different. For example, Katsuki was constantly creating massive explosions. Tokoyami was taming Dark Shadow. Uraraka was spinning around in zero gravity, and Shinso was brainwashing whoever needed a break. While his guinea pig was wearing a bracelet that would give them a mild electric shock every few seconds, so that he could learn to maintain his control even when his victim experienced pain or other physical stimuli. Overall, Izuku thought the exercises were good, but he might talk to Aizawa about some modifications for tomorrow. His current worry, however, was not for his classmates. It was for himself. He didn't have a quirk to train, and while he was sure that Eraser would never leave him out, he didn't know what he was supposed to be doing. One by one, each of his classmates were given their tasks, and just like middle school, Izuku was the last one picked. When Aizawa got back from setting up Shoji and Hagakure's spa, Izuku swallowed his nervousness and gave him his best teasing smile. So, What torture do you have for me today, Eraser? How are you gonna stretch a quirk that doesn't exist? Aizawa gave him a tired glare.
You know there's no point to that. But don't think you can relax just because you don't have a quirk. He grinned. That just means that you don't get to focus on just one thing, like your classmates can. You're going to have to simultaneously train agility, strength, tracking, and mental flexibility, all while practicing evasion. Of all you students' regimens this week, I tried to make yours the hardest.
Thanks, Izuku deadpanned. You set a pretty high bar there, Eraser. So, what exactly am I going to be doing?
Well, you can't really start until 1B gets here, Aizawa complained. But I'll explain the basics.
Suddenly, he lobbed something at Izuku's head, and he had to catch it before it hit him in the forehead. He glared at Eraser, who just smiled, before looking at the object in his hand. It looked like a marble, but had a dimly blinking light in the middle of the glass, along with the number 0. Izuku held it up to the light, but it didn't really seem that special. Very nice, but, what is it?
Aizawa rolled his eyes. That's one of your objectives. There's about 100 of those hidden throughout the property. Your job is to find as many as you can without getting caught.
Caught? Izuku raised an eyebrow. Who's going to be chasing me? All of the other hero students are going to be busy with their own quirks. Izuku didn't think he liked how amused his teacher looked as he responded.
That's why we're waiting for 1B. You're going to be outrunning Vlad King's daughter.
Vlad King has a daughter? Izuku's jaw dropped. Since when?
Since about 6 months ago, Aizawa answered. She's adopted, obviously, but he actually only ended up meeting her because of a recommendation you made on one of Midnight's cases. So just remember, whatever happens, you only have yourself to blame, problem child.
Izuku looked at Eraserhead in confusion. His recommendation? He'd made a lot of recommendations, but he had no idea how any of them could have ended in someone getting adopted. Should he be nervous? He felt like he should be nervous.
Speak of the devil, here they are, Eraser grumbled. Hello, Vlad. Took you long enough?
Yeah, well, some of us don't make a habit of hazing our classes, Vlad shot back.
But don't think that means we're not going to go just as hard as any of your students.
Izuku looked over at Vlad's class, but he didn't see anyone he didn't recognize. Everyone there was a member of Class 1B, so did Vlad's daughter have some sort of quirk to disguise herself, or... Suddenly, Izuku felt someone bowl into him, and his eyes widened as he tried to right himself or get the upper hand on his attacker, only to fail completely and end up pinned under a girl a few years older than him. His captor had blonde hair that she wore in 2 buns, and her smile was literally sharp as she put her fangs on full display in her excitement.
Hi there! You must be Deku, the one I'm supposed to chase. You're pretty cute, aren't you? I have a feeling we're gonna be best friends.
Izuku looked at Eraser in blind panic, but he just snorted.
Deku, meet Himiko Toga, Vlad King's new daughter, and your designated pursuer for the day. Good luck. You're gonna need it.
Izuku gulped and looked up at Toga. Her smile now seemed to be even wider. With how easily this girl had pinned him before he'd even managed to see her, he didn't think any luck in the world was going to do him any good. Was it too late to develop a quirk instead? Chapter 78. Evasion. Izuku eyed Toga suspiciously, even as she let him get up. He was just supposed to evade her? It sounded easy enough, but at the same time, she'd been able to tackle him relatively easy before, so...
Deku, here's how your exercise is going to work.
Eraserhead sounded amused, so Izuku stuck out his tongue at him, but it didn't do any good.
You're going to look for your targets. Each of these little marbles has a tracker inside. You can see them on your phone, but that will only get you so close. For the rest, you'll have to rely on clues from your environment. Toga's weapon of choice is knives. Now, we've taken away her sharp ones, but she'll be trying to tag you with the dull ones.
They look something like this.
Toga brandished a knife in his face, forcing Izuku to take a step back.
They're made out of this blue chalk stuff that's almost as pretty as blood when I slash you.
Blood? Izuku stuttered. Eraser, is this safe? Toga has been taught to manage her quirk-enhanced bloodlust, so she's not as obsessed as she was before I caught her, Vlad King said. But be warned that she is extremely capable with a knife. Okay. Blood-based quirk, Deku muttered. Good to know.
Basically, if Toga manages to tag you with one of her knives, it will leave behind a mark that will cancel out any targets you find. So if you find 20 trackers before dinner, and come back with 27 marks from Toga, you would have -7 points, Aizawa said. And before you ask, the chalk isn't water-soluble, so you won't be able to wash them off before they're counted. Any questions?
Izuku's mind raced through the limitations of the exercise. Is it just marks, or the number of times she finds me? So, if she finds me and slashes me 5 times, one right after the other, would that count as 5 marks, or 1?
5,
Toga said proudly.
but that's no fun, so I'll try and cut you once for every time I find you.
Thanks, Izuku said dryly. I really appreciate the effort.
I'd say take what you can get, Eraser said. Toga lived on the streets for a while, and evaded midnight before Vlad got on the case. So she's got just as much real-world combat experience as you do, if not more. You're going to have to work hard if you want to avoid her.
I guess that's the point, right? Izuku stretched and got ready to run. Stretch us to our limits, right? Plus ultra.
That's right, Aizawa grinned. You've got a 15-minute head start. I suggest you use it wisely. Go!
Izuku ran through the forest. He wasn't quite sure whether it was smarter to pace himself, since he'd been running all day, or try to find as many targets as he could before Toga caught up with him. He also had to keep in mind that Toga would be tracking him, so he couldn't just crash through the forest. Otherwise, he'd be too easy to follow. Eraser sure did want to keep him on his toes today, huh? He glanced at his phone. There were several targets close by, so he chose one and ran toward it. He ended up in a clearing, with no marbles in sight, but his phone said he'd reached the location, and wouldn't zoom in anymore. Izuku squinted and looked more closely at his surroundings. There didn't appear to be anything out of place, except that pile of grass clippings in an area where no one should be mowing the grass. He ran up to the pile and scuffed it lightly with his foot. Sure enough, he saw the telltale blinking of his target and bent down to pick it up. That hadn't been hard at all. Even with a former villain chasing them, he could do this. Izuku smiled and ran off towards his next target. What had he even been worried about? When Aizawa waved her over, Ochako gratefully released her quirk and wiped at her mouth. It was hard enough activating her quirk on herself, but keeping it activated while spinning in a hamster ball was pushing her more than she anticipated. It was necessary to be a hero, so she'd do it, but that didn't mean it didn't suck. She didn't recognize the girl standing next to Aizawa, but she seemed nice enough, and she was certainly excited if the way she practically bowled Ochako over in greeting was any indication.
Hello, I'm Toga. Nice to meet you.
Hi? Ochako looked at Aizawa, who just huffed tiredly.
This is Vlad's daughter, he explained. She's helping with some of the trainings.
Oh, cool.
Ochako smiled.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Uraraka Ochako.
We're going around to each of your classmates and seeing if you'd be willing to give Toga a few ounces of your blood, Aizawa said. She needs it to activate her quirk, and it'll help her train you all more effectively.
Okay, Uraraka said. I guess it's not the weirdest quirk activation I've heard of. Stain's quirk is activated the same way, right? Mm-hmm. Toga nodded. But my quirk doesn't affect the people I take blood from, just me. Are you willing to help me out? Pretty please?
She looked at Ochako with the biggest puppy dog eyes she'd ever seen, which made Ochako giggle.
Okay. No need to pout like that.
So, how do you do this? Do you have a needle or... Toga nodded excitedly.
Yep, Vlad gave me all these needles, and they're even sterile and everything. This'll only take a second.
Toga grabbed her arm, and within seconds apparently found the vein she wanted. Ochako didn't even have a chance to be scared of the needle or anything, before Toga had stuck it in her arm and attached a vial to catch the blood. 3 vials later, she took out the needle and grinned at Ochako.
Oh, this is gonna be so much fun! Thank you so much, Ochako!
She bounded off before Ochako could say anything else, and for the first time, she noticed that the belt Toga was wearing was absolutely covered with different plastic vials. Most were empty, but a good number of them were already filled with blood. She turned to Aizawa.
So, she's really getting samples from everyone?
Aizawa shrugged.
Everyone willing? Excuse me. I have to go before she tries telling Tokoyami that his blood tastes like a dead bird. He hurried off, and Toga blinked a few times before shaking her head and going back to her training. She had a lot of work to do if she wanted to keep up with the rest of the class. Izuku heard the snap of a twig behind him, and immediately dodged to the side, just in time to avoid Toga's knife. She pouted at him as he fell into a fighting stance.
Aw, you're too fast! I was hoping to see you covered in my cuts.
Well, then, you're gonna have to do better, Izuku challenged. I've already found 3 targets.
Ooh, that's so fun, Toga grinned. Alright then, this is a practice round, but if you want me to pull out the big guns, I'm ready. See you soon, Deku!
She bounded off into the trees, and Izuku watched her leave suspiciously, before grabbing the target he'd been after and running off in the opposite direction. He'd heard her coming, so he shouldn't have too many problems avoiding her, but there was something about her next time that rubbed him the wrong way. She was acting like she knew something he didn't, which was 100% true. Izuku still didn't know her quirk. Shota watched his class and sighed. He was mostly here to make sure the kids were taking breaks and didn't accidentally kill themselves, but for now, that just meant he was kind of bored, and his mind kept wandering back to the text Deku had sent him sometime in the middle of the night, when he should have been sleeping, instead of worrying about everyone else around him. Hey, Eraser. I know it's late, but I was wondering if you have time this week sometime. Would you consider talking to Kota? I doubt he would listen to me at all, but I know you've lost people to heroism too. I'm sorry if that's pushing too far. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to, but I was just thinking that you're familiar with a lot of the darker aspects of heroism that people don't talk about, and you might be able to get through to him and maybe give him a healthier perspective on things. Sorry, I'll go to bed now. It was just like the kid to text a novel like that and try to meddle, while also making logical points and apologizing. He had to admit that Deku did have a point. Everyone else that Kota had talked to probably put heroes up on a pedestal and only talked about the good parts, which he'd obviously learned through experience weren't everything. Kota probably could benefit from talking to someone who was willing to acknowledge both the good and the bad of the heroics industry. But Shota shouldn't be that person. He wasn't good with kids. Absent-mindedly, he pulled out his phone. Group chat. He raised a head.
Hey, after the training camp is over, there's this kid one of you should talk to. Not one of the students, just a kid who's seen too much of the bad side of the hero industry. He could probably use a shoulder to lean on.
Sir Nighteye.
And you're not doing it, why?
He raised a head.
I'm not good with kids.
Several people are typing. Sir Nighteye.
You're joking, right?
Miss Jerk. So, I am literally so disappointed in you right now.
Mr. Brave. Wait. He wasn't saying that just to be funny?
Eraserhead.
I look like a hobo and have the personality of decaf coffee. What about me that screams children like me?
Mr. Brave.
I'm sorry to break it to you, Eraser, but you are literally a teacher.
Eraserhead.
What's your point?
Miss Jerk. You wouldn't be such a good teacher if you weren't good with kids, you idiot. Eraserhead.
I'm a good teacher because I don't take it easy on them. I treat the students the same way I'd treat anyone.
Sir Nighteye.
Exactly.
Shota rolled his eyes and stuck his phone back in his pocket, as he heard Tokoyami's yelling get a little more panicked. No matter what the others said, he wasn't good with kids. But maybe Kota was sick of being treated like a little kid anyway. Izuku stopped at a river to cool down for a minute, splashing cool water on his face and letting it drip down his neck. Toga was keeping him on his toes so far, which was good, even if it was exhausting, but he'd managed to find 10 targets and didn't have a single mark so far, so that was good. He heard someone crashing through the brush behind him, and he jumped to his feet, even though he knew Toga was a lot quieter than that. He relaxed a little when he realized it was just Ka-chan. Hey, Ka-chan. You taking a break, or did Erasa change your training?
The hobo told me to go cool down. Whatever that means.
Ka-chan huffed.
What about you?
I'm training right now, Izuku shrugged. But if you see any knife-happy blondes, let me know. Ka-chan rolled his eyes.
Sure thing, Izuku.
Izuku froze.
Izuku, you good?
Ka-chan looked concerned, which only made the alarms in Izuku's head blare louder.
Is something wrong?
Izuku looked at him. He looked like Ka-chan, even down to the scowl lines on his face, but it was just wrong somehow. You're not Ka-chan. Suddenly, Ka-chan's face morphed into a wide grin that looked completely unnatural on his face. And before Izuku could recover from that mental image, there was a flash of blue. Izuku cried and stumbled back, a blue slash mark cutting across his chest. He looked up in shock, but Ka-chan was still there, pouting as he played with the knife.
Aw, that's no fun, Deku-kun,
Ka-chan whined.
What gave me away?
Ka-chan never calls me Izuku, Izuku said tense. He's called me Deku since we were kids.
Oh, so I did guess wrong.
Ka-chan's face started melting away, which was somehow less creepy than him grinning or pouting.
Erasa told me you two were childhood friends, so I thought it'd be dumb for him to call you by your hero name.
Ka-chan finished melting away, and Izuku hurried to look at the ground as he turned bright red. Toga? Are you naked? Toga laughed.
My transformation includes clothes, so wearing my own on top would just be weird.
I think this is weird too. Izuku gulped. I'm just gonna go.
Okay.
Toga sounded excited.
Catch you again soon, Deku. I wonder who I should be next time.
Izuku ran, trying to not think too hard about anything besides his next objective. Seeing Ka-chan like that? And she could be anyone. He made a mental note to yell at Erasa next time he saw him. A little heads up would have been nice.